Hello everyone. In our last lesson we looked at advertising, which is a mechanism by which you are paying money to put your message in front of your target audience or before consumers. Today we're going to look at a promotional tool called public relations, which is also a way to get your message in front of consumers, in front of your audience, and hopefully and usually, it's a way to do it without having to pay for it. So it's actually a very good way for small businesses or businesses that are on a budget or financially tight to be able to engage in promotion without spending enormous amounts of money. One of my favorite definitions of public relations was developed by Charlie Demire, who is a manager at Porter Novelli London, a major PR firm. And he wrote, "Public relations is the art of convincing others, consumers, media, influencers, of a company, brand, or product's relevance rather than simply telling them. PR agencies have always worked to provide their clients with reasons to be talked about and help them identify and communicate a purpose in people's lives. It's been the only way to grab the audience's attention without paying for it." So let's break that down into its three components. The first is you are convincing people of the relevance of your company or your product, of your brand, rather than simply telling them. Often in advertising or in other forms of promotion, you're saying, the XYZ company is great. This is the one that you should use. You're telling them that you're relevant, you're important, you fill a need in their life. With public relations, you're not really telling them that. You are convincing them through other means that you are significant, you are important, you are a company or you have a product that should be considered and looked to. The second element of that statement is that the PR firm, if you've hired a PR firm, or whether you do it yourself, gives a reason to be talked about. For some reason there's something happening that will cause buzz, that will cause people to talk about you. It provides a reason for people to bring you up in conversation. And the third part of that is without paying for it. And as I said, most public relations efforts can be done on a relatively low budget. It's more time and effort and getting it right than it is money. Although if you're a very large firm, you will probably hire a PR firm, especially if you're involved in damage control of some type, which we will get to, in order to do a lot of this legwork for you. But certainly every medium-sized company ought to have someone whose primary task is generating PR or public relations. Now, what types of events are worthy of a public relations effort? Well, frankly, almost anything. It could be that you have a new product, or the product has changed, or you're changing the warranty on it or something. It could be that a new person has joined your organization. In fact, every single time a new employee joins your organization, especially if they're in mid or upper level positions, but it could also be entry level, it could be, there's an opportunity for a press release right there. Jane Smith, formerly of this company, who accomplished these wonderful things and has a degree from this college and was given this award, is now working for the John Doe Company. So anytime there's a change in personnel, that is worthy of getting some publicity. It could be that your company won an award, even if you think it's a silly, nothing award. The general public doesn't really know that. But if your industry group gave you an award for, I don't know, the most conscientious, the most creative, whatever it happens to be, that's worthy of publicity. It could be that you are having an event. I know when a number of years ago I owned a restaurant called the Cayley House in Westmoreland, New Hampshire. And we were having a big event called Keltoberfest, which was a whole weekend in October where we were having Celtic music and Celtic bands and an outdoor beer tent and things like that. We received a lot of PR in the press. We put out news releases, reporters followed up on it. The bands who were coming to play at our pub, they put out press releases, and many people in the media, all variety of media, began to pick up on this big event that was taking place. And they began mentioning it and talking about it and putting it in their what's going on in the community columns. All of this was free exposure. And this was a way actually that our pub could work in tandem with some of the bands that were coming, because we both were able to do this type of promotion. And it simply, one built upon the other, so it created this excitement. It could be that you are involved in a charity. It could be that you are involving yourself in a cause of some type, or you're partnering with a local sports league and you're going to buy all their uniform shirts or something like that. It could be anything like that. Almost anything and everything you do, there is a PR angle to it that you can use as a launching point to engage in this type of campaign. Now, why do you do it? Well, by now you probably could enumerate the reasons. First, you're increasing awareness of your brand and your product and your purpose. Remember, people are making a decision to buy. That internal search is the first thing they do. What do I already know? Who have I already heard of? Who do I already have a good feeling about? It could be to increase brand loyalty. It's to remind people that you're there and you're strong and you're growing. It strengthens morale among employees when they see their own company constantly in the news. This company did a great thing. This company's hired a new person. This company is growing. This company's great. I work for this company. It does help with morale. And it creates that conversation. You've probably all heard of the cliche, it takes money to make money. Well, in our field, it takes buzz to make buzz. You create the conversation and you get that going. Other people take notice and they want to get on the bandwagon and be part of that buzz. And of course, from a different perspective, you may want to be using your public relations tools as a way of damage control. Perhaps some bad news has leaked out about your company. There was a harassment lawsuit. Someone embezzled money. A product hurt someone. Or a product was a flop and didn't work. You now might want to use PR techniques in order to rebuild that image and do damage control, and possibly, in many cases, by addressing that issue directly, and by trying to pivot the press that you've been getting. One of the most common ways of doing this is through the press release. Many people believe that journalists write all of the articles that you read in the newspaper. Well, that's not often true. Very often companies, businesses, people will write a press release and send it out. Now, the newspaper may not may not print it exactly as you wrote it, but it does pique their interest. It does give them something to go off of, and it provides copy for an office that is probably very busy and understaffed, and trying to pull together a weekly newspaper edition. You also might have a direct relationship with a reporter. I know in many places that I've worked, I got to know key reporters at key media outlets, so that if I had something that I thought was newsworthy, I could give them a call and say, do you think we can do something on this? So you can do blank press releases and hope someone notices it and picks it up, or you can start developing that relationship with people in the media. And that's why a large firm will often hire a public relations firm, because that's their job, that's what they've done. You could send them a picture with a caption. Many newspapers or websites love pictures with captions. You might be able to write an entire feature article for a magazine. We're doing something new and exciting, and it's newsworthy, and we'll write this whole article and hand it to your magazine. A lot of magazines and journals will actually appreciate having something like that. And again, they may edit it, cut it, expand on it, but it gives them something to go off of. And if you can get a journal article in a magazine, or you're a feature article in some type of journal, that often goes a long way towards creating buzz and credibility for your company. You might have a press conference. Obviously, you've seen the White House have press conferences. You can do a press conference on your own. We're announcing a huge event, a new structure, a new building, a new product, whatever it is. There's a reason to invite the press to a great event where you're going to unveil something exciting. This is a very common technique when there's a groundbreaking. Anytime a company is building a new building, a new warehouse, a new facility, whatever it is, you get a whole bunch of people out there with shovels, and if you can get the mayor or someone else like that out there, you get them with you, and it's big photo op, and the media show up and they put it in the paper. It's free press for you. So, we're doing this for the purpose of creating buzz for free, or at a very low cost. There is a really big drawback here, however. You're not in control of the message. Once the TV news shows up and says, hey, we were here at this groundbreaking, once the editor of the paper gets a hold of your press release and says, yeah, let's do it, let's run a story on this, the message is now out of your control. And of course, everything we've talked about in this course so far has been based on tightly managing your message. So there is a danger involved in doing a PR campaign, because you don't really know what's going to happen once the media get a hold of it. You may have a great article that you've put together about maybe some cause you're supporting, or someone who's joined your firm who's very knowledgeable or experienced in areas of social responsibility or involvement in the community, and you're really hoping this gets on the community page of that newspaper. And instead, you open up the paper the next day and you find that it's been put on the business and finance page because you're a business. Now, that's not necessarily bad. However, if your purpose was to show what a great community player you are, then the optimum place may not have been the newspaper pages where people go to look at their stock prices. So again, you don't have control over that message once it leaves your hand. And another tool you might use, keep in your toolbox, is Community Access TV. Community Access TV doesn't have millions of viewers, but if you're focused on a local geographic area, and the viewers that Community Access Television does have fits your target demographic for your product or your business, then by going on and having a half-hour show or so, at least you're there, and you are able to control the direction of the messaging somewhat, rather than just leave it in someone else's hand. And once again, it's free. There has always been a very close nexus or connection, for good or for bad, whether you like it or not, between a business's social responsibility, meaning their efforts to do good in the community, and public relations. And it's often a positive. It can also be a negative. And so what I'd like to do right now is go through, there's really 8 different models that businesses use to engage in social responsibility. And actually this is a scale that I put together and was published in 2017 based on my observation of many businesses' practices. Each one of these models lends itself to a different style of public relations. So let's just go through them, starting with the very basic level where there is the lowest level of commitment to social responsibility. And that's number 1, the traditional and casual level. You're a small local business. You're primarily focused on being able to survive in paying your employees and your rent and having a couple pennies left over in the cash register at the end. Your social responsibility tends to be reactive in response to a request by someone in the community. Someone comes in, can you help support our local sports team? Can you come help us support our local arts community auction, or whatever it happens to be? And you want to do something good for the community, and you say yes, and maybe you give them a check, or maybe you give them product off your shelf for an auction or something like that. It's not a major commitment. It's a split-second decision. You make your commitment, and then you go back to doing what you're doing. No long-term relationship. It doesn't really lend itself to a heavy amount of PR. And very few news sources are going to say, oh, they did a wonderful thing. Well, so did other 20 businesses in town. What you might, however, be able to benefit from is if that organization that you've donated to or helped out is having a program of some type, or a flyer of some type. They may say, sponsored by, helped by, supported by, and name your business in one line. Certainly, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But at this basic level of involvement in the community, that's pretty much all you can expect in terms of PR. The next level up, I call the self-defensive actor. And the self-defensive actor is engaged in some type of social responsibility, but it's not because they got a big heart and they want to do good. It's largely because they screwed up somewhere and they're trying to cover their tracks. This is the damage control. And this is also reactionary. Something happened, we better put a positive spin on it. I give one example in my notes about Victoria's Secret, who was criticized for many, many, many years for using very, very thin models that were even unrealistic. And so their response was to begin funding programs for eating disorders. Now, that received publicity, and they put out press releases, and they said, we're working on this and we're helping. The problem with the self-defensive actor is that while that message may reach some people the way they intended, many, many people view this skeptically. Oh, yeah, they're just doing that to cover their tracks. And so it may not be as effective as some other PR campaigns. The next level up is the cyclical, number 3, the cyclical grantor. The cyclical grantor is usually a very large corporation. They understand the importance from a public relations perspective of being involved in the community and helping, but they really don't want to be entirely involved as a company. They'd rather hire someone. You're our community outreach specialist and our PR person, and here's a foundation budget of $100,000 from last year. Go give it away. The cyclical grantor will often give to different causes within a community on behalf of the company, but the company does not have an ongoing relationship. They don't have an ongoing commitment to the causes they're funding. However, when a local housing nonprofit or a local school gets a check for $10,000 from that company's foundation, it's newsworthy. It counts. And that's the kind of thing that lends itself very well to a press release, to a photo op, to good PR. Because your big company has just helped out this small school in this town. They needed laptops, they needed playground equipment, whatever it was, and you came forward. It's a significant way for companies that, quite frankly, don't necessarily want to be overly involved in a cause to do something good and to get PR out of it. The fourth level is what I call the project-focused level. And this is where the company embraces the cause and says, yes, we want a long-term commitment to this cause. We are embracing it. It's ours. We're running with it. We're committed to it. In a project-focused company, an example of that would be Squeaky Wheels, a marketing company in New York City. They're a marketing firm. That's what they do. They're helping clients build websites and do campaigns. They've also had a number of people at the company affected by cancer. And so they established a website called the I Had Cancer website, which is a social media site where people who are struggling with cancer, who are survivors of cancer, who have loved ones who are going through this now, can come together, support each other, share stories, and the website is run by the company for free. It is an expense to the company, and there are 3 out of 20 employees, the last I looked, who are dedicated to this project. That's a project-focused level of social responsibility. This kind of commitment, which is genuine and ongoing, is the kind of commitment that generates very good PR. Not just in press releases and newspaper and media clips, but in short segments, let's say, on Good Morning America, or in articles in magazines, industry magazines, whether it be in the health field or the advertising field, because it's seen as genuine and positive, and it's newsworthy. That is the whole basis of PR campaigns and public relations, is that you are taking what you are doing as a company and you are making it newsworthy. In the public's mind, news is much more trusted than advertising. And so if what you're doing comes across as news, as a spot on the evening news, as a spot in the radio, as a spot on the TV, as a magazine article, it's seen as much more reliable information. This is golden PR, quite frankly. And sometimes people are a little queasy about this. Well, we're doing something because we believe in it. We think it's a good thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Should we be trying to leverage it to get publicity for our company? Well, there's nothing wrong with letting the public know that you are a good player. You are a good neighbor. You are a positive force in the community. Is that going to help your company? Yes, it is. Will some people be skeptical because, well, that's the only reason they're doing it? Yes, they will. But you're not going to please everyone. But you use your PR for these purposes. Level 5 of social responsibility would be the operations-focused approach, which means rather than a particular cause being your focus, like the one I just mentioned, your entire operation is focused on some socially responsible cause or good. So a company that insists that all of its water be recycled and all of it have a net zero energy use, and that people are given bicycles to come to work and leave work, and the company employees all have a vote in what the company is doing next. That kind of company is operations focused. Everything they're doing is encompassed by the socially responsible socially responsible approach. That also lends itself very well to long interviews, long magazine articles, long journal articles, to the extent that magazines and media will reach out to your company because they've heard about this unique company and how can we talk about this? It sounds so nice. Levels 6 and 7 are one step up that ladder. Level 6 is the social business venture, where a for-profit firm is making money for a non-profit cause. Example of that is Tom's Shoes. Tom's Shoes, they're expensive shoes. Their cause is to get footwear into poor people in the developing world. The way they do it is by selling their shoes in the United States and elsewhere at high prices, and for every pair of shoes they sell, they're able to send one pair for free to the developing world. That's a social business venture. They're using profit for the purpose of pushing a non-profit cause. The kind of the flip side of that, number 7, is the hybrid non-profit. The hybrid non-profit is a non-profit corporation. They're not organized to make money, but they own a business. And instead of relying on donations and fundraisers, the business supports the non-profit purpose. And the example I use in the outline that you have is Housing Works in New York City, which is a non-profit organization dedicated to finding housing and medical treatment for homeless HIV-positive youth in New York City. Well, how do you fund an operation like that? They run cafes, they run bookstores, they run thrift shops, and so those for-profit operations fund the non-profit operation. And actually one of their last marketing directors was a Greenfield Community College graduate. So those last two, the social business venture and the hybrid non-profit, both of them are involved in so much good and have such unique mechanisms for funding themselves and making it happen that they often receive a lot of good PR, and the magazines and the newspapers and the media will contact them for a story in addition to setting out their own. The last level is not necessarily the best one to be in, and that's the pure nonprofit. This is the American Heart Association and the Humane Society and Wounded Warriors and the Komen Foundation. And the reason this is not necessarily the best place to be in from a PR perspective is because you are presenting yourself as a nonprofit. Many large nonprofits have very large budgets, and many of their executive directors receive very large salaries. And here is where PR can actually turn against you. It is very, very common for the media to scrutinize large nonprofits who are organized for a good cause as to what they're actually doing with the money they receive. If they find out that you received $20 million this year in donations and fundraising, but 80% of that went to administration and salaries, and only 20% of it, or 10% of it, or 5% of it went to the cause that you're fundraising for, that is deadly PR, and that will spread like wildfire. And this is an example of what I said earlier when I mentioned that with PR, you're not in control of the message that gets delivered. And if a message like that gets out, that that could, put your nonprofit out of business. So, this has been an overview of PR, the use of PR. It's a good tool. It's an inexpensive tool. It's a tool that you can develop by cultivating relationships with the media sources in the areas where you operate. You will lose control of some of the message, but for the price, it's almost always worth it. So consider that in your toolbox as you're putting together your promotional campaign for your product, your company, or your brand. See you next time.